Good morning. This is Avraham Shira for the Chabura of Nar Shalom. This morning we're going to learn from the end of Mesechet Berachot about the secrets of acquiring Torah. Now we're certainly not going to exhaust this subject because it's a subject that is involved and specific and it relates to many different kind of people and many different levels. But nonetheless, the Rav is going to begin, Od Patach Rabbi Yehuda b'chvod Torah v'darash. In honor of the Torah, he stood to give a drasha. In other words, just to speak Torah is to give it honor. Haskedu Shema Yisrael hayom hazeh v'niyeta la'am. It is the day before Moses dies. The Jews are outside the land. They know Moses is not going to go in the land with them. It's a serious day. And Moses calls out to all the people. And how does one man talk to 3 million people without a microphone, without a stadium full of speakers? Well, we know that we are taught that the Shekhinah spoke through Moses. The divine presence was in his throat. Shekhinah malei gorono. Now, to understand this is to understand that the Shekhinah is not a mechanism of sound. The Shekhinah is in each and every human being, and especially the Jews that were coming out of Egypt with Moses, the proximity of the divine presence, it was so much a part of their life that when Moses spoke through the Shekhinah, it aroused everybody else's spark of Shekhinah. And so that they all could hear what Moses was saying, even if there were 3 million people. So understand, think of it like an internal hearing system. Moses didn't have to scream. It wouldn't have been really appropriate to scream words of Torah. It's not pleasant. Divrei hachamim v'nachat nishma'im. The words of the wise are heard with pleasantness, with ease. So just that little note is enough to understand a little bit about what was going on over there, that everybody has this spark that's connected to Moses. And so when Moses spoke, especially when he's addressing the nation on the last day of his life, that the Shekhinah was connecting him to all of them, like an internal sound network. What was that the day the Torah was given to the Jews? Of course not. Halo Yom Sof Arba'im Shana. It was the end of 40 years in the desert. 40 years of paying for the sin of the spies and the golden calf and a lot of other things wrapped into one. Rather, it teaches us rather that the Torah was beloved to them, and those that learn it, every day as if that day the Torah was given to them. So when it's something that you love, it's like the first time every time. So you see, love is the secret of renewal. It's the secret of renewal of learning the word of Hashem. It's the secret of renewal in our relationships, in our work. That when you love something, it's like the first time. It's new. And that is certainly a very precious thing. This rabbi says, Teda shahare adam kore kriyat shema shacharit v'arvit v'erev echad ne'en kore domeh kami shelo kara kriyat shema me'olam. A very interesting idea that supports what we just said, that a person his whole life, he said Shema in the morning and the evening, he declared God's oneness. And we learned just yesterday on Shabbat that when you declare, when you say the words, God is one, you actually draw the concept to you. In other words, you're bringing it out in creation and you're strengthening your faith by saying it. So speaking is a way of communicating with ourselves and the world, and of course with Hashem. So this person who said Shema day and night, his whole life, and then one time he didn't say it, whatever happened. Now we're not saying intentionally he didn't say it, and we're not saying God forbid, he was so sick he couldn't say it. But something happened and he wasn't able to say the Shema. And remember, the Shema is a very short little paragraph, and it's not terribly difficult to say the words. But nonetheless, it's as if he hasn't said it at all, ever, if he misses one day. Why would that be? Why would missing one day after 70 years of saying the Shema be as if he's never said it? Rather, because the Rav explains, because that mitzvah of that time and place in his life was missed. And there's certain mitzvahs, when we miss them, we can't ever replace them. We can't repair or that moment in time that we had a chance. Now, it doesn't mean we're not going to have thousands of other moments to do wonderful things for Hashem in the world. But we have to also understand that every moment is a unique moment that never was and never will be again. And therefore, if we miss saying the Torah one time and you're so attached to it and you love it, you'll feel the lack as if you've never said it. Now, that's not something that happens overnight usually. It's something that people have to work very hard for and spend a lot of time for. But, I know that as a kid when I played football and baseball, if I missed practice, I felt terrible. Hopefully I love the Torah more than football and baseball. But nonetheless, anything that you love doing, when you miss it, it's like it's gone. But it's really, of course, we know it's not. But each moment in time is a special moment. And therefore, we want to take advantage of those moments, especially something like Kriyat Shema, because it is a time-bound mitzvah. There are certain hours that we say it where it is a mitzvah doraita to say it. And then we could say it like Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. We could declare God's oneness all day long. But the mitzvah direct from the heart of God is during a 3-hour period in the morning and in the evening. Okay. Going further, this word hasket, literally Moses told the people, silence, be quiet. Now, can you imagine telling 3 million people to be quiet without a microphone? Well, in the Gemara's inimical way, they're going to explain the word hesket in terms of something completely different. Asu kitot v'asku b'Torah. Make groups of people to learn Torah. Lefi she'ena Torah niknet ella b'chabura. Because the Torah is not acquired unless you learn it with a group. Now, there are many levels of acquiring, of receiving Torah. There's the words, their meaning. There's their implications. There's their intonations. There's the mystical revelations behind the words. There's Hasidic implications. There's halachic implications of every word. However, you can't get all of that learning by yourself. Now, it's better we learn in groups, the rabbi is saying, because that's how we acquire it. And the word chabura comes from the lashon, from the root word of chaver, friend. That we should learn Torah with our friends. Because we choose our friends because of commonality. We like the same things. We think about similar things. We appreciate certain things. It's based on priorities. It's based on our background, millions of factors why we choose the friends that we do. But when you learn Torah with your friends, it's another level completely. And this, by the way, is part of the reason why we started the Chabura in Nar Shalom. Living in Jerusalem for many years and learning in yeshiva, friends started to come in to learn together, something like 20 years ago. And it became a focal point in people's lives in the Nachalot in Machane Yehuda, which everybody knows is a very busy, I call it the Tachana Merkazit, the central bus station of spirituality in Jerusalem, is Nachlaot, because everybody's coming and going there, and it's full of yeshivot and Beit Knesset's and old rabbis and young people that are just off the plane exploring Israel for the first time. So Nachlaot and Nahar Shalom, our yeshiva, which was founded 70 odd years ago by Mekubal Rab Mordechai Shira Alav Shalom Zatzal, who was actually trying to save the tradition of the Kabbalah of the Rashash, because the Jordanians had taken the old city and they closed down the yeshiva of Beit El, where the Rav learned, and he reopened the yeshiva in Nachlaot, which was considered a very religious and spiritual community in the center of town. And from there, many of us came through and met these people. I remember the first day I went to the yeshiva, an old rabbi gave me a cup of tea and cookies, and he kissed my shoulder. Like, well, wow, who is this guy? But it felt so warm and normal, like family, like home. And that's really another secret about learning the Torah. We have to feel like we're home. We're with people that care about us and love us. And of course, those are our friends as well. So the Gemara is telling this 2,000 years ago, learn with your friends. And I highly encourage everyone out there that likes to learn, is curious about learning, has friends who learn, to form a group, set a time and a place, put some tea and cookies and coffee or whatever on the table, and learn together. And it doesn't matter how much you know, and it doesn't matter how much you can translate, because nowadays you have Torah books in every language almost of the main languages of the world, and we have translations that we can share. And so the Chabura is an idea for every community, for everybody in the Jewish world, and those people who are interested outside the Jewish world. So Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi China adds, my dichtiv, what is this? It's written, Herev alabadim v'no alo. This is a pasuk from Yirmiyahu, and Yirmiyahu, we know, was a prophet whom God told him, I chose you when you were in the womb. That means God already had a mission for Yirmiyahu before he was born. And it was a very unpleasant mission, because Yirmiyahu was the chief prophet to announce the destruction of the temple. And he suffered a terrible death. And we don't want to go into it too much here. But Yirmiyahu, he said to the people, there's a sword waiting for the sorcerers. And those who are with him, why? What's he talking about? Hotim, they've sinned because they're lacking knowledge. Because they took the pasuk, Asher no'alo ve'asher chat'anu. They were prevented from learning and they sinned. So there is this level where people don't know the Torah, so you cannot not sin if you don't know the laws. And of course, God understands that. God does not judge us for things we don't know. So we have to have a little mercy for ourselves, mercy for whatever level of knowledge that we have of the Torah, because that's the way we were made, and He made us. So, Kadosh Baruch Hu lo ba b'trunia ala briot. God does not bring charges against a person that cannot be responsible for those charges. Here it's the case of not being able to learn the Torah. But the interesting thing is he uses the word badim, which can mean the liars, but it can also be translated as sorcerers or magicians. Now, why would we call a sorcerer or a magician a liar? And why is it forbidden to visit sorcerers and Egyptians? That's a funny slip. No, why is it forbidden? Because they're going to tell us something about the future, and they might get it right. Many times they do. There are many psychics all over the world that have a pretty good track record. You look at Edgar Cayce from 100 years ago, and the man had 14,000 recorded prophetic moments with his people that came to visit him, and in general. And he's a non-Jew. But if you read his story, he was a very righteous person. And so we know that there are prophets by the Jews, and we know that there are prophets by the non-Jews. But why are they called liars? Well, first of all, if they're using non-holy means to achieve their prophecy, they're not bringing you closer to the one God. Because the one God only uses holy means. And we know that there are many different unholy means to acquire information from the upper worlds. You know, back in the day when Jacob was in what's nowadays Syria, it was called Padam Aram then, Aramea. When Jacob was there, his father-in-law had what are called trafim. Trafim, listen closely, it's not terribly pleasant, but what they would do is take a dead person's head, and they were able, with chemicals, to shrink it, and then they would take a name of a impure spirit and put it in the mouth of the dead head, literally, that had been shrunken, and then you could ask questions to it, and because this name had power, the head would speak back. And this is one of the ways that the necromancers would try to receive knowledge from the upper worlds. But God is in charge of the upper worlds. So does he want me coming in through the back door with mud on my clothes? That's not how you go into heaven. And then we know that there are those who would take bones and put bones in of the dead human beings and put them under their armpit and then say incantations and also be able to access the information that people need. Because prophecy and divining is really just about getting information that we feel will help us. Now, a long time ago, I said to our Rosh Yeshiva, in front of a lot of people, I said, why do we want divine inspiration if it's only going to tell me bad things? Now, people think it's a big deal. You could look at somebody's forehead and know their past or their future or their traits. And it is a big deal on a spiritual level, but you got to know why you're doing it. Why do I want information that's going to tell me something that's going to bother me? Now, we're going to have a Shira on my YouTube channel very soon that deals exactly with this question about King David and how King David faced death. And it's an amazing thing. So we look for that on our YouTube channel. And nonetheless, these liars, they're lying not necessarily because their information is false, which it could be, which is really dangerous, because then they can completely mislead you. But they're also lying because they're not representing the source of the knowledge. They're not representing the creator of the universe. They're representing forces that got them in through the other side. And we don't do that. And it's forbidden. And if you know it's forbidden and you do it anyways and you're warned, there isn't even a death penalty attached to it to the person who brazenly does it. Now, thank God that doesn't happen too often. Now, it doesn't mean you can't open up the newspaper and read the horoscope. But you should at least know what you're doing when you do it. And if many people, I grew up in Orlando, Florida. My mother used to go to Casadega. Casadega was a known psychic community. All the people that lived there were psychics, and everybody in the Central Florida area would go there to get their readings. Sometimes they would use a Ouija board. Sometimes they wouldn't. Sometimes they would use tarot cards. All kinds of things to get information. Of course, my mother didn't know any of the things that we're talking about, and she had not been taught Torah. So she's not, God doesn't bring her into judgment on something she never did, and nobody else. So even if today you've gone to such people and you've gotten information, hopefully it's helped you. But we have to be wise and we have to be understanding why and what and who we're seeking our knowledge from. And also to know that sometimes it's good not to know things. I was at breakfast with Rav Kaduri once, and somebody asked the great Rav, who was in the picture behind my head, who was known to have divine inspiration, Rav, can you look at people's foreheads and know their sins? And the Rav chuckled in his unbelievable way, and he said, I like to look for people's good deeds. That's what you want to see. What you want to see is the good that people do and perhaps will do in the future. So we have to really quantify and qualify our knowledge at every step of this path. Now the Rav goes on to explain in the Gemara about this pasuk in another context. Cherev al sonehem shel tamidei hachamim. This also means there will be a sword upon those who hate the sages. It's one thing to disagree with the sages. We're allowed to disagree with the sages to a certain degree, depending on how much we've learned. If you find a contradiction to the rabbis, then we're supposed to discuss that. But that has nothing to do with hating them, hating what they stand for, hating what they're here to teach us. And they say that's the truth about Hitler. That the reason he hated the Jews is because the Jews brought conscience into the world. The Jews brought a concept of the one God into the world and said we have to answer to him at a certain point in time. It might be after 120 years when we leave our bodies, but we still have to answer to that. And a lot of people don't like that idea. They don't like to have the idea they have to answer to anybody. And that's really where one of the roots of anti-Semitism is. It's really about hating God and hating the idea of having a higher authority. But if there's no higher authority, then this whole universe is completely chaos and violence and injustice. So there has to be something behind it. Otherwise, who would want to be here? Okay. And they go on with this interpretation of the word bodim. They turn the word from bodim, the liars, into bod, meaning collections. Bod is also a word in modern Hebrew for fabric, because fabric is actually a collection of threads that are woven together in the warp and the woof on a weaving machine. And so too the rabbis would gather together, voskim b'Torah, and learn Torah together. So another idea of why we need to learn Torah together, because it strengthens us and it's pleasant. And we share the highest ideas in the world, and instead of all the other ideas that are, out there in the sports bars, etc., etc. And not only that, but they rise up, they climb up, and they gather ketiv, and it's written hacha v'noalu ketiv hatam asher noalnu v'lo ela shahotim v'shene'emar v'asher chatanu. Right, that these people, when we get together and learn Torah, it enables us it protects us and helps us from sinning. That by being in a group of people, I have a sense of group responsibility. I have a sense of honor, which when I'm by myself, it's not the same. So when we're in a group, we care about each other. It's a good thing to care what other people think about you, if not because, oh, maybe he's judging me, or maybe because I'm not as smart as him, or I'm not as clever as him, etc., etc. No, it's caring about what people think means caring about what I do because of their honor, and relying on each other and not wanting to let each other down. So this is another reason and another way that we can acquire Torah, because we care about our souls and we care about each other. Okay? And another answer they give me, listen and hear, Israel. Katatu atzmechem al divrei Torah, gather together for the sake of Torah in public places. Kedamar Reish Lakish, minayin she'ein divrei Torah mitkaimim ele b'mi shememit atzmo alea, shenemar zo Torah adam ki amut bo'el. So this is a famous drasha, and it's a very stark sentence to say that the Torah is not established and fixed ella by somebody who dies over it. Now, nobody wants to die while we're learning this moral law and this great history of spirituality. But rather, when it means we die over the Torah, it means my ego dies. It means that that lower part of me dies for the sake of my upper soul, the higher self. And that higher self learns Torah very, very well when it's not being bothered by the lower self. So it's really a conversion process where the lower self actually gives its power to the upper self. And then we're able to, the Torah that we learn and that we live lasts forever. Because remember, there is a recording device in the universe called the mind of Hashem. And nothing is forgotten and nothing is lost. Nothing good. Okay? So when we say to die for the Torah, it means that lower self dies. Shneimar zot Torah Adam. This is the Torah man. When man, kim yamut ba'ohel, when a person dies in a tent. Now this pasuk, this verse, is actually speaking about when the laws of impurity, when somebody, lo elenu Hashem yishmor, when somebody dies in a house. Here it's in a tent, but same idea, that there are many laws that concern the impurity of a dead body, and it's a science unto itself. But nonetheless, we can understand more about the acquiring of Torah, receiving the Torah, is when our vessel is pure from the lower self, when I'm not being dragged into all kinds of places that I want to go. Now, another example, Esket v'Shema Yisrael has ve'achar kach katet. He says, have mercy on yourself and gather with your friends to learn Torah. Kederav Amar Rabbah, le'olam yilmad adam Torah v'achar kach yehegeh. He gives us another advice, that we should learn Torah on the simple level first, and then we go deeper and deeper and deeper. So first we have to get the words and the translation and the simple interpretation, but afterwards we can start asking deeper and deeper questions. If we jump all the way to trying to figure out the Kabbalah of every pasuk and the mysticism behind every word, we're going to lose it's like trying to jump up a ladder and skip steps. And we're going to lose important levels of meaning before we get to the deepest level. Now, this is something that a lot of us have experienced. I know when I first began keeping the Torah in Los Angeles a long time ago, I just wanted to learn Kabbalah and meditate all day, and I was on a spiritual journey unto itself. But I very quickly learned that I needed to know the laws, and I needed to know the Gemara, and I needed to know the Chumash, the 5 books of Moses, and there are many, many layers to this amazing document that God has given us through his prophets and kings and sages, etc. So we want to have all the layers in our learning. And even if you do a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, it all comes together into a beautiful tapestry of knowledge. And so, and again, it doesn't really matter how much you know. It's just a little bit of law, a little bit of Gemara. And learning Gemara like we do, it's like going to law school. And not everybody wants to go to law school. But when we at least understand the structure and the argumentation, it creates this give and take in the mind. And it helps us receive. Look, we just had one verse, and I think we had 5 or 6 different interpretations of one verse. So even if you're running a giant corporation and you have a board meeting and you have 10 of your vice presidents in front of you, there's 10 different opinions in front of you at least. So learning Gemara, learning Talmud helps us to receive other people's opinions, which is a big part of being mature and being understanding and sifting knowledge to get to the real truth of any question, whether it's a Torah question or it's a business question or any of the questions that we need to answer in this lifetime. Okay. So with all that said, I want to move on to learning some laws about Pesach, which is only a few days away now. I hope everybody is enjoying cleaning, because if you can enjoy cleaning, then you can just enjoy about anything. And it can be stressful. But the other day I was cleaning my room, and it was actually quite fun because it's a chance to fix things up. And you also, when you clean your house, you find things that you've lost during the year, which is kind of a nice thing, right? The rabbis teach us that 3 things are found with Hesech Hadat. Hesech Hadat means that I wasn't planning on it. It just happened. So one of those 3 things is the Messiah. It just happens. And so too is a snake bite. That just happens. And finding lost objects. Things that you have. So when we go around the house and we clean, it's actually a wonderful chance kind of to bring the years, the Torah year, the year of that begins in Nisan, is one of the Roshei Chodeshim. It's one of the Rosh Hashanahs of the year. And so when you find stuff, it's kind of nice. It kind of connects you because remember that there's a verse that says that the private possessions of the wise are chavivim alav. That your own personal keychain, your own personal watch, a gift that your grandmother gave you. Physical items have integral value and intimate value if, of course, depending on the background and how you got them. But there's also a deep level of the things that we have in our lives that we're attached to. And sometimes the attachment is exaggerated, of course. But I remember when I first bought my car at 16 years old. When you're a 16-year-old and you buy a car, I used to go out at night in the driveway and just look at it. It's like my best friend. We're attached to these things. And that attachment, though, is a piece of you. It's a piece of soul called you. And so, Havivim, Hafetzehem Shel Chachamim, that the rabbis, their things, they take them, they hold them to heart. And that's why it says that Jacob went back across the Jordan River to get a little pach of shemen, a little jar of oil. Now we are told that oil was not just any oil, that was oil that was originally derived from the olive tree that Noah planted after the flood, which is an amazing idea if you think about it, as we're talking about, Noah died about the time that Abraham was born, give or take. So Jacob was the 3rd generation after, so they weren't so far apart. But can you imagine if you had an olive and you planted the seed of that olive that came from Noah, that oil would be a special thing because that olive tree signified the rebirth of the human race. And I think that's a pretty valuable thing. So Jacob went back across the river for that little item. So as we're cleaning and we're shaping up the house and we're fixing the bookshelves and we're, dusting and mopping and doing things that we might not do so often, it's a wonderful time to take pause and to look and to reconnect to all the things that we have because they're given to us also by the Creator. All right. The Rav tells us that after the main Suda of the night of Pesach, we eat the afikomen. The afikomen is the little piece of matzah that we hide away at the beginning of the Seder, and at the end of the Seder we eat it, and it's a zecher to the Pesach offering, that we should eat it at the end of the meal and not eat anything after it, because we want this taste to linger with us for the rest of the evening till we go to bed, because this is a reminder of the Beit HaMikdash and the Korban Pesach that was brought in the Beit HaMikdash. And today we don't have the Korban Pesach, and we need to be reminded that we still are lacking. No matter how good your life might be, God willing it, you see it that way, but you might have everything in the world that you might desire. You might have wonderful family, a wonderful career, a wonderful bank account, wonderful teachers, etc. But you still don't have a Beit HaMikdash. You still don't have a building that's dedicated to atonement, a building that's dedicated to bringing people back to Hashem on an international level. Ki beiti beit bait lekol ha'amim. That my house is a house, beiti beit tefillah, a house of prayer for all the nations. We have to remember that. The Beit HaMikdash, even though the Jews are the ones sitting on the ground crying for it, the rabbis taught that if the non-Jews knew what they lost in the Beit HaMikdash, they would cry even more. So the Afikomen is a memory of the Pesach offering that was brought in the Beit HaMikdash, and it was eaten on the night of the Seder all over Jerusalem, and therefore we want to have that memory with us on the night of the Seder as well. And we should all merit to see this rebuilding. And we should merit to see it rebuilt without war, and without destruction, and without the terrible prophecies that have been spoken. Right? There's a rule about prophecy is that if it's a negative prophecy, a prophecy of destruction, it does not have to happen. If we do what we have to do, which means chiefly to pray that it doesn't happen, and to do good deeds, and to change the spiritual equation so that it doesn't have to happen. But we do also know that any good prophecy is guaranteed it will happen. So it's a good thing to have in mind on the night of the Seder, is this connection to the Beit HaMikdash. Baruch Hashem, many of us live near Jerusalem, near the old city, near Har HaBayit, and you can go there, and you can see where the Beit HaMikdash is. I went up there once in my life, and I felt devastation. Some people say they feel, big spiritual high. But I felt complete emptiness when I was there. I felt like it was like an abandoned plain. It's a very big place. It's like the size of 17 football fields. And it's flat, so you could see the whole span. But it felt like it was empty. It was missing itself. And we all know what it feels like to feel empty inside. And I think the Beit HaMikdash is also a symbol of what we are lacking inside as well. Kol mi sheyesh lo dat, the rabbis teach, anyone who has true knowledge in his lifetime, ke'ilu nivnei Beit HaMikdash. It's as if he built a Beit HaMikdash, which tells you what? That dat, knowledge, your mind, is a miniature internal Beit HaMikdash. And how that is, that's also a wonderful shir that we need to learn together, because when we understand the unification of these levels of creation, whether it's your mind or the mountain in Jerusalem or the entire world, they're all connected in this wonderful symmetry of structure and unity. Okay, so we're going to take a few minutes and come back and learn some amazing Torah from Rabbi Nachman about one of the most difficult questions in the theological world. How is it that bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people? So we'll be back in a few moments.